Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Xander Sprague.
Hello, epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Xander Sprague, and today I am joined by Denise Dielwart. I want to thank you so much. Tell us a little about who you are and what you do.
Well, hi, Xander, thank you so much for having me on and inviting me onto your podcast. It's an absolute honor to be here. As you said, I'm a widow. I lost my husband in 2009, very suddenly to a blood clot, which spiraled me into really what I do today, helping other people in grief and helping other people to realize that grief is not a life sentence, that losing a loved one is actually growth. It's not that it is a loss, it is a sadness, but it's a whole new life that starts, and it's your life, it's our life. So that's where I started. Was in 2009, just realizing and having to go through that pain and that loss and that growth, because sometimes it just takes that for us to actually realize our magnificence and how great we are.
Absolutely, and I am so sorry for your loss. I lost my older sister 27 years ago, so I can say I really understand the depth and breadth of all of that. And I got to say, I too agree that although it's not anything we want to go through, loss does sometimes help us discover new things about ourselves.
Yeah.
We discover our own resilience. I think we're all very resilient, but sometimes we forget how resilient we really can be, and we are.
Absolutely. In loss, we lose ourselves. In a widow situation, in a couple situation, what I find with a lot of widows is that they lose themselves in the marriage, they become one, you become one. Same with widowers. So when the other partner dies, they don't know who they are. And it's not only widows, it's when you lose a child or you lose a sister, because your identity changes, your role changes.
Oh, absolutely.
And that, who am I now? Who am I now without that person?
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, what society expects us to do is just carry on as though you're just the same person, nothing's changed, everything's the same. Just get over it and you'll be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my experience, Denise, was after a while, people were obviously very sympathetic when it first happened. But I did have one person that I know who's like, well, aren't you over it? And I was like, I will never get over the loss of my sister. And what I like to, when I'm talking about like sibling loss and I'm talking about loss in general, I said, we're working our way through it. Some days better than others, but you're not going to get over, and I'm going to put in quotes, over losing your husband. You don't get over it. You find ways that you're able to incorporate that loss into your life. Some people don't. Some people just they get stuck at that loss. And I know some of the work that you're doing is to help people, I believe, not be so stuck.
Just what I was going to say is that's where I come in, because I realized that it's very easy, and I'm sure you have, you've experienced loss of a loved one as well, your sister. It's very easy to actually be the victim.
Mm-hmm.
Look at me, poor me, look what happened to me. Oh my goodness. It's not fair. Life's not fair. Why did this happen to me? Why me? And I actually had a beautiful 84-year-old widow. She was a friend of mine, and her husband had just passed away, and they'd been together for like 60 odd years, her and her husband. We were sitting around her kitchen table, and she said to me, why me? It's not fair. And I just looked at her and I just said, well, why not you? Why not you? Because it affects everybody's going to die. We're all going to die one day, but society just blanks it out and says, you know what, we don't want to see that, we don't want to hear that, it doesn't happen. So we're not shown or taught how to accept loss.
You're right. We are not. What I found was, and I know a little about Australia, and I'll say from what you said, I'll say here in the United States, we don't deal with death very well. We treat it like it's the most communicable disease in the world. Oh my gosh, you've experienced death. I can't talk to you because that might rub off. I might get death. And of course that's not the way. And you're exactly right. We are all going to experience loss in our life.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it easier, but
yeah.
it's going to happen. Like death and taxes, right? Those are the two guaranteed things in life, right? We are at some point going to die. And there are cultures and religions that have processes around death that maybe make it a little easier. There's something I know in the Jewish religion, they sit Shiva. There are different cultures that frankly deal with death a lot better than, I'll say, the Anglo-Saxon community.
Yeah, in Australia too, let's when I started out, I worked only with widows because that's what I knew.
Sure.
I now work with everybody, and I realized that that everybody needs help, not just widows. But what I found with the widows too, and it's so common, is that initially, and you touched on it as well, and it happens to everybody, when we lose our loved one, everybody rallies around you. Oh, I'm so sorry. What can I do? They bring meals. They're at the funeral. They're at the wake afterwards, and everybody's there for you. Let me know what I can do. And then it's crickets. Everybody disappears.
It's falling off a cliff. Like all of a sudden there's too many people around, and all of a sudden there's no one around.
That's right. And then you start asking yourself, what did I do wrong? Who did I offend?
Mm-hmm.
But what gets missed is that our lives have changed. Theirs hasn't.
Yeah.
So they just jump back into their life. They just jump back into their life and go, oh, well, that's such a sad thing that happened to Xander, or that's a sad thing that happened to Denise. He lost his sister. Denise lost her husband, but, they got their kids, they got their families, they've got everything is still working. Their life carries on. And then they might bump into you one day, maybe down the track, and they go, oh, how's it going? In my case, I had a work colleague say to me 6 months after Martin passed away, bumped into her at the store. And she said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear Martin's passed away. So have you got a new man in your life yet? And that's what's expected in society. It's like, okay, well, you break up with that one. That one's gone. Now you go get a replacement,
Right.
And I said to her, I was actually taken aback, and I went, no. And she said, oh, haven't you got over him yet? And that's what it's expected. We just get over it. We just go through that loss. And even in the workplace, when somebody loses somebody in the workplace, you get bereavement leave, and that's it. Now you've got to come back and you've got to perform 110% again.
Yeah.
It doesn't work. The brain is like mush. The brain is mush.
Right. And I think, I've had a long time to think about this experience, Ed, and I've written 2 books about sibling loss. So like I talk about it along with my epic stuff. But there are a couple things at play here. You're right. First of all, 5 days of bereavement leave is like just ridiculous, because frankly, that whole time is taken up just trying to make arrangements, right? Luckily, when I went back to work, I had an exceptional manager who, although I was back at work, is sitting in my apartment wasn't any good. I'd rather sort of be around people. Yeah. Gave me the space. I probably went in for about a month and pushed paper around. I mean, I did some work, but I was not by any means productive. Right. But was really supportive and understanding that, I was doing the best I could. I think the other thing about, haven't you moved on, whatever, some of that I think is, and I'm sure you experienced this, Denise, where you go, let's say you're going to some kind of a social event or something after Martin passed away. And you sort of put on your, I call it your grief armor, right? You're ready for people to talk to, and no one talks to you. and no one acknowledges your loss, and you kind of have this feeling of like I was ready and no one talked to me. And I experienced that. And I remember at a memorial service we had for my sister, probably about 6 or 7 months after she was my sister was murdered. It was a summer community on the east coast of the United States where my family has a house, and a lot of those people hadn't been able to come in, so we were having a service for the community. And I get up and spoke, and I said, you don't have a miracle sentence will make it better for me, and I don't have a miracle sentence for you, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Still talk to us. Share stories.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Share like it doesn't yet. You're right. You're not going to say the wrong thing. And even if you do, and I cry, understand that it's all part of this process of working our way through the grief. And look, I'm sure you experience this where you're like, oh, I'm doing well. And something can happen. It could be a song on the radio, it could be a smell, it could be going someplace, and all of a sudden you feel like you're kind of right back at the beginning for a day or two, right? The train, as my dad called it, the train came off the tracks.
Well, and the thing is too, is that in society, we are taught, and unfortunately, it's become the norm that time heals all. Just wait for time. Time heals all. You'll be okay. Just wait. And then, like, we go and see a grief therapist or a grief counselor, and they are then taught the 5 stages of grief. The 5 stages of grief keep people so stuck because it's like, well, I'm not angry. What if I go into this stage? And what if I'm not in that stage? And grief is grief. So I don't even know what the stages are because I don't buy into them. It's anger, depression, whatever. Grief is grief. You need to feel that pain. You need to go through those emotions.
You do. Absolutely.
And we need people to acknowledge us and those emotions, like you said. Just say something, talk about it. Remember the good times, remember the funny times, remember the bad times.
Absolutely. Do not canonize. Someone dies and all of a sudden they canonize. Look, I love Lucy very much. She was a great person, but she was by no means a saint, an angel. There were times where she was really mean and was a jerk to me.
She's human.
Absolutely. And so we talk about it, and people are like, oh, you can't say anything bad. I encourage people, tell me stories. Yeah. I learned so much about my sister that I would never know if I didn't give people permission to say, share stories. And it doesn't matter if it's a bad story.
Yeah.
Because I'm learning about this person who's obviously very significant to me. It is how we keep them alive in our life, right? If we don't talk about them, we don't acknowledge their life. And another thing that I share with people all the time is my sister was 30. How old was Mark?
55.
55. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful 55-year rainbow that was Martin's life.
That's right. Yeah.
Why focus just on the dot that is the end of his life and not remember and celebrate? I celebrate Lucy's 30 years and the stuff that she did and who she was, the good, the bad, the ugly, the warts and all. But for me, it is so much more rewarding. I'm not ignoring the fact that my sister isn't here. No. I'm just not perseverating on the fact that she's dead.
And this is the thing, we have to, and it's not acceptance. You never accept, you never reach, there's this acceptance at the end of it. When we go through major changes or we change something majorly in our life, that person is still there. 3 years ago, I sold our forever home. I didn't want to let go of it because it was our forever home that we built together. It was on acreage. It was up north, sort of in central Queensland. Sure. And we had a motorbike track out the back for the grandkids, and it was Martin's haven. So I clung on to that. It was the last thing. I had tenants in there. I moved around, did what I wanted to do, but that was like the last bastion of Martin. That was the last thing. And 3 years ago, I went back And I thought, no, I'm going to go back into the house. And when I got to the house, I thought, what are you doing here? You're on 8 acres by yourself. You can't see your neighbors. This is not my life anymore.
Yeah.
So I sold it. The emotional trauma of selling that house was grieving that loss all over again. Even though I've done all the work, I've got all the tools, I know what to do, I still had to go through those emotions and feel them.
Absolutely.
And, you know, that was what, 15 years now. So it was 12, 13 years ago that he had passed. So to accept somebody to go through the 5 stages of grief, wait for time, okay, now you're okay, get on with your life, doesn't happen that way.
No, I'll counter a little and say, one, I think there may be more than 5 stages of grief. I think it's a very fluid thing. As I said, you could be up at acceptance and all of a sudden be back at, abject grief because you heard something on the, song on the radio or something, right? But I do think from a psychological standpoint, structure helps people, especially when you feel so like just getting out of bed is the biggest effort, right? Like you just, so I think there is I'll say, I think there is, I do agree with you that it's not like, oh, I'm working my way through. I think it's very fluid, but I do think as a structure of, the stages of grief are helpful to help people understand where they may be. People like structure. Helps us, especially when we're feeling as lost as I know I felt, and it sounds like you did after your loss. And I think there are those really emotional things that you have to do. I know we took Lucy's stuff from her apartment and we had it in a storage unit for 10 years. And
yes.
And I didn't go to the storage unit all the time and go through her clothes or whatever. And then my parents were moving and we're like, okay, what are we going to do? And my mom and I went over to the storage unit and the two of us are like, why were we holding on to this? Mm-hmm. I got that at the time we weren't like, oh, let's just, but now Lucy's clothes, it's out there for 10 years in a box in a storage unit.
Yeah.
No one wanted them and we had to get, and it was sad. I think time does, it's not that it heals so much as you now have better tools to deal with it so that I talk about it in my first book about it's kind of like a cubby hole in our life. There's things that we can take in and out, like the day you got married, or if you have children, the day your children were born, or whatever. That's, oh, let me take that out. Oh, that's great. And then you can put it back in. When we experience a loss, it's kind of like a life raft. You pull it out and all of a sudden, and it takes up everything.
Yeah, that's right. You see, that's where with my flow method, that's a structure that takes us through. You see, it's what we do within that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just sitting back and waiting for time.
No, there's work to be done.
There's work to be done. There's work to be done. You talk about a storage unit. I had a beautiful client who, this poor woman, when I started working with her, she didn't know up from down, sideways from anything, because she discovered after her husband passed away that he had another whole family in another country that she didn't know about. So she had the betrayal, she had the loss, plus he left her with no money. So she was couch surfing. What happened? He went away and he went away for business. And he said, while I'm away, sell the house. And when we come back, we'll buy a new house, because they were in that process of buying a new house. Mm-hmm. And the house sold while he was away. So because the money went into the joint account, she didn't bother to check it. And when after he died, she went in and it was empty. There was nothing there. So she found herself couch surfing. Within the first week of us working together, she had struggled for about 5 years before that. Within the first week of us working together, she went to her storage shed and she cleared it out, because she said she now had the tool. She rallied a whole lot of friends around, and she said she could then face all his stuff in the storage shed. And she was selling TVs out of her boot, and she was doing all
totally. And it does feel it is hard, but for those listeners who may not have experienced a big loss like this, let me put it this way. We all have a time where we have to go through our clothes.
Yeah.
And we have to for whatever reason, you need to get rid of stuff. I like t-shirts, and I've gotten better at this, but I used to have like a ton of t-shirts, and they were sort of talismans of where I'd been and what I'd done, and good times. And I had t-shirts I had from university days that I literally moved coast to coast multiple times. Never wore them, but kind of had this thing of, "Oh, I don't want to give this up. I remember when I went to this place and it was so fun." And it was. But here's the thing. I'm not wearing the t-shirt. It's taking up space in my drawer. And I have all of those memories in here. I don't need the t-shirt. The t-shirt is literally just a clue. I can take a picture of it and go, "Oh, let me look. Oh, hey, here's the t-shirt of when I went to, this place."
Yeah.
Now I can have all those memories. The same way that when we lose someone, and it is hard, right? Oh, here's the rug that we bought and we looked so long. But if you don't need it anymore, there is actual goodness in saying, I need to let go of these things because
Yeah.
they are no longer who I am,
Yeah.
what I am, or where I am.
That's right. We have to let go. And, I have and that is such a common question, is when do I clean out their closet? And my answer is always, when you're ready.
Yeah.
There is no time frame. There's no, well, within 6 months, within 4 months, within, I've had ladies say, and with the loss of a child, when do I clean their room out? When you're ready.
Yeah. And
Yes.
and you don't have to throw everything out, but you may not need, we certainly didn't need all of Lucy's clothes, right? I mean,
She's not going to wear them again. I mean,
right. We didn't need the furniture that we moved. She was in Chicago at the time.
yeah,
My parents were living in Boston. So was I. Yeah, we moved it because we had to get it out, and what are we going to do with it? But certainly, her desk lamp was not anything any of us needed anymore. So let's donate it. Let's find a way that it's no longer our possession, but either it goes to the landfill, or you're able to let someone else
yeah.
utilize it and give it more life. I mean, yeah, there was stuff that, yes, some stuff just needs to get thrown out because you can't donate it, right?
They would have thrown it out anyway, but we hang on to it because we have that memory, because it's a memory that's attached to that thing. And we think that if we hang on to that thing, or we let go of that item or that thing, we're going to forget about them. We're going to forget about the memories. We just.
Are you going to forget about Martin?
Never.
Exactly.
I always say to my widows, and I've had a lot of them that have worked through the program with me and worked with me, and they've got to the stage where they've moved forward, and they've got another man in their life, and life is happening, and suddenly they say, he's starting to feel a bit out because I still talk about my husband, my late husband. And I always say, you've got to let him know that he's in a threesome. He's in a threesome because your husband and you didn't have a bitter divorce and you hated each other and he's still alive. He's not there anymore, and he will always be in your heart, but in a different part of your heart.
Absolutely.
Not that same heart. The person you're with is not your husband, and you know that. That's why you've moved forward.
Right. And I know that Lucy is in my heart. She's a big part of my life. It's a big part of why I do the stuff with the siblings and stuff, because sadly siblings grief is not acknowledged,
Not
rarely,
at all.
or at all. And that's part of the work I do, is trying to raise awareness to say, when a child dies, everyone asked how my parents were, but no one asked how I was.
That's right. It's the same as when a husband dies. Everybody asks how the wife is, but not how the children are.
Yeah, they lost their dad.
They lost their dad. They lost their dad. So, if you lose a child, you've got other children as well that are feeling that loss.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know?
that's why the second book I wrote, which is called Why Don't They Cry? Understanding Your Living Child's Grief. I literally wrote it because I had so many parents coming up and saying, I lost a son or daughter, but I have other living children. Xander, you talk about this all the time. Help me understand. And I'm like, okay, clearly I need to write a book
Yeah.
that tries to explain some of what's going on. I'm explaining the sibling survivor experience, and I'm just talking about not only my experience, but the experience of other siblings I've worked with who sort of say, understand that there's changes, that there's, I call it the new family, right? I was
Yeah.
the middle child. I have a younger
Yeah.
sister. I have my older sister. Technically, I'm the oldest child now.
Yeah, that's right.
There are
Yeah.
expectations for the oldest child, and I never had those. So,
And that's when your role changes, your identity changes.
yeah, all of a sudden, you are all of a sudden, not that you weren't always the head of house, but now you're like, I've got to deal with all of these
Things.
things, and any relationship, there's sort of that division of labor where Martin's taking care of this, you're taking care of that,
Yeah.
and you're not paying attention because Martin's taking care of it. And
Yeah.
whether they fall on, I'll say, traditional gender roles, you're
Well, we had a very traditional, he did outside, I did inside.
right. Like, you may have been doing the cooking and doing some of the cleaning.
It was as simple as that.
Right. And he may have been the one paying the bills and stuff.
Yeah,
And
I paid all the bills. I paid all the bills, thank goodness, because when he died, I knew where everything was. So that was a
right, but
blessing, you know.
yeah,
But that was our roles. We did everything together, but he did outside, I did inside. So when he died, and I was on 8 acres, I suddenly had to get on a ride-on mower and go and mow.
right. And there are those things that each couple does, and it's not that you have sat down and go, I'll do this, you do that. It just sort of works its way out. But when that person is gone, all of a sudden you're like, I have no idea
Yeah.
what they did. I know my dad passed away about 6 years ago, and although my mom and dad did lots of stuff, she's like, your dad paid these bills, and I don't know what was set up, like with an auto pay and from what bank account or whatever. And so there's that whole, not that she certainly paid lots of bills, and she paid some, but and again, it was just that division of labor. But all of a sudden she's like, how the heck am I gonna, I don't even, their bank accounts I may not even know, because he just paid it. I mean, lots of couples have kind of multiple accounts, because again, if you have a rental property or something, you may have a completely separate account to say, all right, that's for the rental property, whatever, right? Like, so yes, you have those new, all of a sudden you're like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
And I know all of a sudden I'm like, how do I be the oldest child?
Yeah.
And depending on culture or religion, there may be much bigger expectations that all of a sudden, as a young adult, I'm like, I didn't have that, but I know certainly culturally there are expectations in some cultures of what the oldest child will do. And all of a sudden you're like, I have no idea. I got no manual for
There's no manual, and it's the little things. It's the little things, like a light bulb will blow. Normally it's just like, oh, okay. And Martin would get up and, oh, that's gone. That, the toilet's in darkness now. Okay, well,
right.
if next time you go to the toilet, oh, there's light. Let there be light.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, it's like, okay, I can't get up there. How do I do this? How do I unscrew that? What do I do?
Where's the ladder? You know what I mean?
Where's the ladder? What do I do here? How do I do this? And Martin brought me coffee in bed every morning, and it wasn't an expectation. He just got up earlier. He would make a coffee for himself, and then I would still be in bed.
Yeah.
Suddenly, my coffee in bed. Oh no, I got to get up now and make my own coffee. And I know that sounds really, but it's like, oh, okay, now I'm making my own coffee.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's those little things when I was a bookkeeper, tax agent, and that before in my previous life, as I call it, my previous life. And I had this one particularly bad client that I would see her once a month to do her taxes and all the rest of it. And Martin would say to me, text me when you're leaving. And I would text him and say, okay, I'm leaving. And it was about half an hour drive. By the time I got home, there was a wine sitting on the coffee table for me. Sit down, relax, chill.
Yeah.
It's those little things that you miss. It's those that you, and then we'd sit down, we'd have a chat, or we'd sit by the pool and debrief for the day.
Yeah,
And suddenly that person's not there to debrief.
I know. Or you can debrief, but you're not getting their feedback.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so Denise, this has been so fun, clearly, because I'm like, oh my gosh, where did the time go? You were doing great work. How can people get a hold of you if they want to, get help from you?
The best way is just to go on my website, which is flowgriefacademy.com. All the links are there. You can to book a call with me. There's a link there to book a call with me. There's a link there to join my inner circle. I have an inner circle as well. If you're not quite ready to do to work with me, we've got an inner circle where we meet. We have a fun time. We really do. And then there's also it's all there. Everything is there. So if I have to sit here and give you all the links, we'll be here for another hour.
No. That's great. That is awesome, and I'll make sure to have that in the description. Well, Denise, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Although a challenging subject, a very important one, and truly an epic discussion about loss.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity, because we continue living, and the loss of a loved one is not the loss of our lives. It's the beginning of a new life.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I want to remind everyone that if you are ready to take your epic first steps, go to epicbegins.com. And if you go there today and you'd like a free e-copy of my book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, How to Plan, Achieve, and Enjoy the Journey, you can get your free copy at epicbegins.com. As always, I want to remind everyone that epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Xander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Xander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.